Living in Virginia, you're in the fast lane on the information superhighway. We've invested $3 billion in Virginia's broadband network to give you one of the fastest internet connection speeds in the world, so you can build relationships, bring new business to our state, and meet the future of education. It's amazing what we can do together. Visit VCTA.com to learn how broadband connects the Commonwealth.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the VCTA Broadband Association and Cox Communications, connecting Virginians to their government. We're so pleased to have two members from the Virginia Beach area. Delegate Askew, good to see you, sir.
Good to see you too, Woody.
Delegate Lindsey, good to see you, sir.
Pleasure to see you again.
Well, congratulations. You are a new chair, privileges and elections, and you've already had a victory there.
Yeah, we've been able to get the ERA through. It's been a long time coming. It was timely, it was necessary, and thankfully with the right votes, with the right people, right-minded, we got it done.
So how long a process was that? That really started some time ago here in the General Assembly.
For as long as I've been here, and I've been here since 2014, there have been some version of the ERA that they've been trying to get through. And we were very close last year, but through some procedural chicanery, we weren't able to get it to the floor. We felt like there were enough votes on the floor to get it through. This year it sailed through the committees, a P&E on the Senate side and the House side, and thankfully we were able to have a victory yesterday.
So some major changes in the House of Delegates. Talk to us about those.
Well, I think there are more open, progressive minds there. It's a situation now where the Democrats are in control of both houses, the Senate and the House of Delegates, and so some of the legislation that was getting bogged down or in committee is now getting to the floor, getting an opportunity to be heard and voted upon.
So who are some of the new chair, especially African Americans?
We've got a number of new African American chairs. We've got Dolores McQuinn in transportation, Roz Tyler in education, myself in P&E. Lamont Bagby is on rules, but he's not a chair, but he's chairman of the Legislative Black Caucus, so very important position here. Luke Torian is appropriations, and so a number of us.
And so we have a speaker.
Oh, and I'm sorry, Commerce and Labor. And we have Jawan Ward in Commerce and Labor.
Okay, we have a speaker.
And I'm going to get in trouble if I don't say this. Chanel Herring is chairman of courts.
And of course, she's the new majority leader as well.
She's the new majority
leader. And we have a Speaker of the House who's female.
That's correct.
Great, great. So how has it been for you? It's been about a week. You hit the ground running, I assume.
I did. It's been quite the ride. I've thoroughly enjoyed the process, getting my sea legs under me. So it's been exciting. So
any surprises?
Not too many surprises. I've worked up here for a few years. I believe the workload and what's approaching, I'm more anxious about once the bills start hitting the committees I'm sitting on, and once I have to start presenting my bills in front of committee. But I'm excited about that.
So what committee assignments do you have?
I'm fortunate enough to be on Privileges and Elections with Chairman Lindsey. I'm also on County, Cities, and Towns. In communication, information, communications, technology, and innovation. They changed the name from science and technology this year.
Right. So what brought you here? Why did you get involved in politics?
Really just to give back. The community gave so much to me. I was born and raised in Virginia Beach, graduated from Tallwood High School. I got my start in politics working in 2012 as an organizer for the re-election of Barack Obama, and since then I've just been engaged and involved in just trying to connect people with the political process, not only in Virginia Beach but across the Southeast.
So do you have any bills of interest that you are pursuing this session? I do.
I'm actually presenting and carrying a bill that is going to put in process a test for lead contamination in our public school system a few months back. We saw some elevated levels of lead in some schools built prior to 1985. So I'm working with the local school system in order to implement a process and put some standards in.
So what committee has that bill been assigned to, if it has been assigned?
I have to go and double check that. Since it's it could be potentially education bill, so I have to go back and double check that. But I'm excited to get it through, and it does have a cost, so I'm sure to end up in front of appropriations. But I don't believe there's a cost in making sure our kids have clean drinking water.
So have you been able to attract any co-patrons?
I have quite a few. I'm working on getting more today. I've worked with Delegate Fowler and a few other local folks, and also Delegate Davis. So making sure taking the bipartisan approach.
So what's your district like? Talk to us about your district.
So it's with the new district, it's pretty suburban. I had the benefit of having a town center, which is really nice, but it's suburban and middle class. It's very similar to where I grew up. So beautiful people, and it's a beautiful part of the state.
Great, great. One of the big issues that's going to come before your committee again, I assume, relates to this constitutional amendment creating a redistricting commission.
No question about it.
What does that resolution say now? Why does it have to be passed in identical form again in order for the voters to have an opportunity to vote up or down on it?
Well, the constitutional amendment is all about nonpartisan redistricting. And we're looking at a process where the voters select their elected representative rather than the elected representative choosing who gets to vote for them.
Because right now, you and other members of the General Assembly have the opportunity every 10 years to draw lines. Is that
Correct.
The concept? Is that at the state level and federal level?
State and federal level. The General Assembly is charged with drawing the congressional district lines, the House Senate lines, and the House of Delegate lines. Traditionally, that's gone through the P&E committee, and then whatever bills that were considered ultimately make it to the floor to be voted upon. With the constitutional amendment, people are very concerned about enshrining something in the Constitution without there being a situation where there's a lot of eyes on it. So the process is that there has to be 2 passages, and there has to be a statewide election in between.
I see.
So the timing here now is that this would be that second time around.
Okay. And as currently constituted, that constitutional amendment would call for the creation of a 16-person body, I believe, initially to draw these lines.
Yeah, there was a lot put into trying to have it balanced in terms of the Republicans being able to offer membership, the Democrats being able to offer membership, and then the backstop being the Supreme Court. That if the 2 sides, through their representatives on the commission, were unable to agree on lines after 2 attempts, it would then go to the Supreme Court to have them take action.
And that's the Virginia Supreme Court.
The Virginia
correct?
Supreme Court,
Right.
correct.
Is there any criteria in the constitutional amendment that sets parameters around how these lines should be drawn?
Yeah, there are, and they're looking at traditional criteria from the practices of redistricting, things like communities of interest being kept together, that it being contiguous, that it being a situation where you don't pull from different areas and you try to make sure that it's compactness. So those type of things, the enabling legislation, I think, is going to be key. Because the enabling legislation is really the engine that drives the train, so to speak. It's going to be that which governs in terms of what you absolutely have to do.
Now, as a result of litigation over the last few years, there were a number of districts that were redrawn by the courts. Was one of those districts yours?
It had an effect.
Okay, I
actually,
understand.
yes.
The reason he's here is
Yes.
because of the Bethune-Hill case, because some of the best parts of his district that he speaks about were formerly mine, and I'm happy to say that in that shift we got some progressive-minded people in one community being able to be a part of the process that otherwise had systematically been pushed out for the sake of gerrymandered districts.
Now, I know you weren't part of the effort to vote on a constitutional amendment last session, and I know you probably haven't had an opportunity to study it in detail, but what are your thoughts about this resolution now?
Well, I think at the time it was really a good piece of legislation. It was a thing that was worked very hard on, but I think now that we have the opportunity to really digest, take a deep dive into it, and we have the opportunity to have the majority have Delegate Lindsey on as the chair of P&E. I think it's time to take a look at it and make sure we have, we have the opportunity to make a piece of legislation as close to perfect as possible. So I think that's what we're going to do this time in P&E and sort of go from there.
What are some of your concerns? I know other members have expressed concerns about that constitutional amendment regarding minority representation, number one, and number two, the fact that ultimately the Virginia Supreme Court would have the decision, the final decision, if you will.
Well, we have to remember that the appointment of judges is political. They're political appointees. And the composition of the present Supreme Court, out of the 7 justices that are on the Supreme Court, 5 were Republican appointments, and only 2 were Democratic appointments. Now, I'd like to believe that we understand the rule of law and that we follow it. But I think that when there are gray areas, people tend to revert back to their principles, their thought processes, their values. My concern is I want to get that out of the process altogether.
So is there a way to do that? You talked about enabling legislation. Is that one way to do that, you think?
I think that is one chief way to do it. And there's some very good competing legislation out there, competing bills out there that look at, let's make sure that we dot our I's, we cross our T's, because while we want to enshrine something that is for generations to come, we want to enshrine something good for generations to come.
Now, when is that likely to be taken up, or do you have a timetable at this point?
It's already, many of these bills have already been signed to subcommittees, and I'm relying upon the subcommittee chairs to report them through.
So are you still on appropriations?
I am on Commerce and Labor.
Oh, Commerce and Labor. You're no longer on appropriations.
No, but it's just as good a committee.
Oh, okay, great. We talked a little bit about the lead problem in the schools. How generally are your school districts faring?
I believe Virginia Beach public school systems are, is one of the best in the state. I think I'm a product. As I stated before, I went to Tallwood, and I think we have, similar problems to folks across the state. A teacher shortage. I think that of course helped with teacher pay raises. I think we have an excellent program. We have academies where students can go. Learn different languages or concentrate on technology and prepare for their next steps in life. So I think we have a really good school system. Of course, infrastructure is an increasing problem, and how we're going to fund our education system and rebuilding of our schools is something we have the opportunity to work on this year and prepare for generations to come.
Now, what about the resources that teachers have now? I mean, there's so many more problems that our children bring to these schools these days, and they need a lot more resources to assist them. Do you think there's a need for more resources?
I absolutely think there is a need for more resources. I've seen a few pieces of legislation that folks have presented that help fund more counselors in our schools. So I think that's one benefit, and I think that's something we're going to get through this year and continue to work on. I think in the social media age, our students are, before we could go home if you're being bullied. The day stops at 3 o'clock, 2:30. You go home, hang out with their friends and family. But now in the social media age, it just doesn't cut off. So I think kids need these resources in order to deal with increasing mental health issues.
Delegate Lindsey, are we likely to see a lot more voting rights issues come out of privileges in elections this session?
I think we are. I looked at the number of bills that have been referred to the committee already, and probably when you're talking about access to the voter rolls, the voter booths, there have been more bills this year alone than what I've seen in 5 years prior being on that committee.
What about absentee voting, at least in terms of no longer requiring an excuse?
I think no excuse absentee voting is the wave of today. I strongly believe that one piece of legislation has a very good chance of getting through. It's been, if for no other reason than the fact that folks have said they want to be able to have an easier way to get to vote that's convenient to their schedules rather than just regimented to one day doing one block of hours out of the year.
And I believe you have a proposal that would, in essence, declare voting day a holiday.
Yes, we do, and that's one more thing in that one more tool in that toolbox. Of let's make it easier for the people to be able to exercise their right to vote.
And how would you accomplish that?
Well, we brought that up before, and the concern was the fiscal impact. Now the thought is to take Lee Jackson Day and take that holiday away and replace it with Election Day. So there's no fiscal impact, and it has a more meaningful use in terms of persons who otherwise would want to have access to the voter box.
And what kind of response have you gotten about that proposal?
The response has been varied. There are people who are very passionate about the fact that this is a holiday that deals with celebration of former Confederate generals and that it should be held in great reverence. There are folks that say that is the time of old and that we're now in a more progressive state and a more progressive nation, and given that we shouldn't be commemorating that sort of thing.
So tell me this, what are some of the kind of business development opportunities you think there are for small business in your district?
As we all know, Virginia Beach and our region is heavily relying on our military industrial complex and tourism. I think we have the opportunity to, look to build small businesses through incubators, entrepreneurial incubators. There's some in some other cities, and I think with having a town center, we have the space and opportunity to do this. Maybe, some subsidies for small businesses in order to enhance them and help them grow, not just in the first year, but over time. So I think we have a lot of opportunity to grow small businesses in Virginia Beach and sort of get them thriving. I know a lot of folks, specifically in my generation, aren't as jobs as long and have a more entrepreneurial spirit. So I want to, help them by doing those things.
Now, what about veterans? I assume you have quite a few veterans in your district.
Definitely quite a few. I know and we're looking at workforce development opportunities, or even taking the skills that they had in the military or the jobs they did in the military and working to transfer them into civilian life. So we're working on those things as well.
What about the institutions of higher learning? And I know the Black Caucus has made a lot of efforts, and as a result, there's more funding for our HBCUs included in the governor's budget.
That is correct. There's increased funding in Norfolk State. There's increased funding at Virginia State, and all that is about making sure that we, as they say, the rising tide raises all ships. So we're looking at that. We're also looking at funding for the Proton Therapy Institute at Hampton Institute, and it's
University, sir.
I'm sorry. I went to Hampton Institute. He went to Hampton University. So Hampton University. So that's one more thing that we're focused on.
Tell us a little bit more about that institute there at Hampton University.
Well, one thing that we all know and recognize is that it's a beautiful institution. One of our taglines is the standard of excellence, and I truly believe and hold that true. I think it's one of the staples of our community and a really economic driver of Hampton in the region. I think President Harvey and his staff have done a great job taking it from the time my mother and Delegate Lindsey and other folks attended and continue and thriving and keeping on that track of success for future generations.
And is it affordable?
Affordable.
That's questionable.
We did, however, this year the governor has in his budget an increase in some tag grant funding, so folks that maybe cannot afford it or don't want to go into substantial student debt can afford to go to universities like Hampton and some other private schools
You mentioned
across the
TAG,
country.
that's the tuition assistance grant.
Yes, sir.
And that especially relates to students who have gone initially to one of our community colleges. They maintain a certain grade point average, and they're almost automatically admitted to our institutions of higher learning, and then they can take advantage of financial assistance.
Yes, yes.
You get complaints about the higher cost of education from your constituents?
Absolutely, and is one of the reasons why the administration has really been motivated to try to make community college affordable. So many people don't have as an option to just go through the 4-year process with, conventional 4-year process with our institutions of higher learning, and going to community college is a must. So, it's almost a duty for us to make sure that we educate our citizens who want to be avail themselves of higher learning.
You mentioned being on Labor and Commerce. I noticed that there was a subtle change to the name of that committee. I assume that was intentional.
Yeah, well, you've got to remember that Jawan Ward, our present chair, has been involved in organized labor for decades, and the feeling almost was that this was about business first and then labor, and I think the switch is to let you know that it's about the working man, but also the business component.
And so what's happening in your local school districts? I know the teachers are clamoring for increases in their salary. He mentioned deterioration in our facilities. I assume some of your school districts are facing those same problems?
Absolutely. I represent Norfolk and Virginia Beach, and we've got some real challenges with infrastructure and making sure that we modernize some of our buildings, and that we actually tear down and replace some others. So that's always a big problem as time goes on. And in my jurisdictions that I represent, there are more older schools, so that presents a challenge. But then there's also, as Alex mentioned, the need to hold on to good talent, because they're going to other areas, and we want to make sure that we keep the teacher pay to a point where we remain competitive, not just in the region but within the state.
I know you're no longer on appropriations, but there's an issue around lottery proceeds being reduced significantly as a result of these, what do they call them, gray machines in retail establishments.
These
What's that all
skill
about?
machines.
Okay.
I'm not on appropriations any longer, but I am on finance, and that's one of the issues that we've really been given a deeper dive to. What has happened is that a lot of the general fund budget has had earmarked from it monies from the lottery proceeds. The lottery proceeds have dropped dramatically because we've now had these little parlors, where they have, and these businesses that have games of chance. It's accessible, it's cheap, but it's not regulated, and those funds aren't coming to the general fund. So we're looking at legislation to address that, so that we can recapture some of those monies.
Is that something you're seeing in your district, the proliferation of these gray machines?
I do. As you enter 7-Elevens and local other local stores, you do see them. I don't see them as much in my district, but I agree with Delegate Lindsey. They do need to be regulated. There's a large funding portion of our funding for our public education comes from lottery. So if that's a declining source of revenue, we need to sort of make up for it. And I don't know whether these games are the answer, but some regulation does need to be done.
Another big issue is going to be gun violence. I assume, well, first of all, it's a nationwide problem. It's a problem here in Commonwealth. It's a problem basically everywhere. Where do you stand on that?
As you know, this spring we had such a violent tragedy in Virginia Beach. I think, and there's a slate of bills that are hopefully soon to be on the floor that we're going to have an opportunity to vote on that are common sense. They're from one gun a month to a potential ban on assault weapons. don't know where we're going to end up on some of these pieces of legislation, but something does need to be done, and I believe something will be done this session.
So you had a lot of people this past Monday here. You're going to have a lot more even this coming Monday. There were about 8 measures, I believe, the governor mentioned in his State of the Commonwealth address. You think most of those will pass the General Assembly this session?
I think they're all going to get a good listen to and a good look at. I think that there's a will to make sure that there is not this situation where guns are too easily gotten into the hands of those with mental health issues. So do I believe that red flag has a real chance of passing? I do. I also think that there's a real opportunity for passage of legislation that looks at what types of crimes a person has been convicted of and limiting their access, or what type of charges they may have and limiting their access. As to one gun a month, I think that there is a good body of information out there that would support that being sensible, and I think it has a good chance of passage.
So red flag laws, one gun a month, background checks, which would include
universal background checks.
That would include private sales, I assume.
Yes.
Okay.
Because that's been the loophole that really has allowed for the proliferation of gun sales here.
And of course, the red flag laws are the ones that have gotten quite a bit of attention. I mean, a number of states have those now. Have those laws now. In terms of due process, what protections will there be for an individual who presents the kind of probable cause necessary to search and seize a gun from his or her home?
Well, remember, the courts are always the backstop. So we've got a situation where persons can contest what law enforcement may otherwise, or social welfare agencies may otherwise say is an unfitness to possess a firearm. So there's still going to be a full opportunity for a hearing.
Good. I want to ask you, even though you're a new member, what do you think, in your mind, success will mean for you by the end of the session?
By the end of the session, I believe success will mean passing a progressive slate of legislation, even if it's not mine. If we're going to increase minimum wage, as stated before, pass a slate of comprehensive gun reform bills, increase teacher pay, find a dedicated source of funding for our transportation. I think that is what success will mean to me, and taking some things back to the 85th district that'll benefit folks on whether they voted for me or not. So that's what I define success as.
For example, getting that bill through that we talked about earlier.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
And what about you, Delegate Lindsey?
Well, I think that if we get nonpartisan redistricting done, that's going to be the benchmark for me. That's my committee that I get to serve as chair on, and I believe that it is a cry that's been made by the people, and we want to answer it.
Great. Well, Joe Lindsey, thank you so much for being here. I'll ask you, good to meet you, sir. Good luck the rest of the session.
Thank you.
Thank you, Woody.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the VCTA Broadband Association and Cox Communications. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans. Mm-hmm.